Hi, I'm Rad Linux, and today we're going to be revisiting my most popular video here on YouTube entitled "Is the Flipper Zero Right for You?" Thanks to everybody who's interacted with that last video. I'm, you know, really appreciative, and it's encouraged me to make more Flipper Zero content. That's allowed me to hammer down on some of these different features and some of the different concepts of the Flipper Zero, and I think I have a better perspective now on whether or not this is the right device for you. So without further ado, let's get into it. On the review side, again, this device is really just solidly built. Good weight, good feel in the hands, signs of just high quality manufacturing and part sourcing. The plastic on here I don't see very often because I do have this orange case. So I don't know how it works for like fingerprints and stuff, but I didn't notice any burrs or poor quality, flashing on the individual plastic components. So that's always nice. And this rubber case has actually held its color very well. It doesn't hold a bunch of grime and oil like I would have expected, to be honest. Things like button actuation are really nice. They have a bit of a kind of like a mechanical feel there. It's my guess. And then it has like other signs like USB-C port. So that's like just a sign of a higher quality, more premium device that they're not afraid to invest in a couple cents more here and there just to make a better product. So it's always nice and appreciated. The battery life on this device is great. I've gone for like about 7 days or maybe even a little bit more on a single charge. This is like a continuously on device. So again, that's just really nice battery time. I usually get that with about medium to light usage and more conservative settings like turning my Bluetooth off and having the backlight turn off pretty quickly, stuff like that. Lower brightness. But even with heavier use, I can't imagine that it's gonna severely impact your ability to use the Flipper Zero. If you're powering a module, you're gonna get obviously less battery time, but this still should be like a multiple day battery, in my opinion. Uh, if there was one critique of this device, it's that the screen is soft. I think a lot of us have noticed that the screen is kind of easy to scratch and ding up. So you can see I've got a nice little gouge on there and some scuff marks. So get yourself a screen protector solution of some sort. You're gonna just be glad that you did. It's gonna make the device feel nice and fresh for a much longer period of time. In terms of like pocket size, it's a little bit thick, a little bit chunky to actually keep in your pocket, especially if the clothes that you purchase don't have incredibly large pockets in them. So I really just keep mine wrapped up and I keep it in a small bag with me, or in my small bag that I carry around regularly. And it's convenient. It's nice. It's definitely pocketable, hand sized, handheld. Holds nicely. One hand operation. Pretty good stuff. Uh, this device does require a micro SD card. Uh, it holds some of the databases that the firmware is going to use, as well as things like our captured or whatever types of signals and codes we want to have on here, as well as now like applications. They've switched from the initial plugin setup to the new .fap application setup API. So now we have drag and drop applications, which is really nice. It means we can have a ton of different applications that are at our disposal really quickly, really easily. Now, this can take up to 128 gig micro SD. That is absolutely not necessary. It's definitely overkill and frankly fallacious. We are storing things that are primarily counted in bytes, not even megabytes. So 128 gigs is way too much. The Flipper team recommends 16 to 32 of a very high quality of micro SD card because I guess there's certain underlying features that don't end up on some like the very, very cheap alternatives. Uh, and that sounds about right. 16 sounds about right. I am still using a 4 GB Patriot micro SD card, probably the bottom of like the reasonable quality line for using with the Flipper Zero. I I use about 1 gig of the 4 gigs associated, and that's with like a bunch of different stuff on here, tons of sub gigahertz and infrared codes, as well as like multiple versions of programs. I've been I was fighting the API, the new API for a second, so I have a few different versions of some of the software on here or applications. So you really have to work hard to put a lot on that storage card. So yeah, again, 16 seems like a sweet spot. 32 seems like way plenty, and 128 would be insane. You probably don't even need like an A2 class card or anything like that either. I doubt this is putting the kind of work on that like a Raspberry Pi or something will be putting on your micro SD card. At its core, this device is a microcontroller with a very adorable little firmware that allows us to interact with a bunch of onboard I/O. So over here we have a sub-gigahertz antenna that allows us to send our sub-gigahertz signals and receive those signals. Inside of the base, there are 2 more antennas for RFID and NFC, as well as an NFC controlling chip. On the other side over here, yeah, here we go, is the infrared remote window. So this is where we're going to do our TV codes, fans, stuff like that. And then we also have our one button one wire terminal here to interact with those types of like very simple dongles. The device has USB, like I said, and that is a primary feature for like bad USB, U2F, the USB to UARTs adapter capabilities. And then also, this is how we're going to connect with our desktop app and how we're going to create serial connections with the Flipper Zero. And if you haven't gotten into the command line of the Flipper, I definitely recommend you do that, because the command line has some different hidden features for the Flipper Zero, along with the fact that there are a few applications out there that are starting to switch towards like a command line interface in order to allow for more complex commands to be sent, and so to have a little bit more control and a little bit more power in the way that we send commands to external devices. And so that's going to be really helpful, really beneficial to you, and I do recommend looking into that. I have made a video about it. I don't know if you feel like taking a peek at it, go ahead on back and check it out. This also has Bluetooth. It's used in the Bluetooth remote app that I've also made a video about. It's also the only way that you can connect to the mobile app. So the mobile app only uses Bluetooth. The desktop app only uses USB. That does lead to some issues. Frankly, I don't love the mobile app, but it's fun to see that the different creative things people are doing with Bluetooth. I think that, where was it? I saw that they added another little feature to the Bluetooth keyboard, which is the TikTok controller. So what once was just like a little like keypad now is a full-size keyboard and media remote and mouse, as well as a TikTok controller. So that's really cute. The killer I/O though on this device, in my opinion, is definitely going to be the exposed GPIO. And that's because this offers us a few different possibilities. Not only can we connect directly to devices and interact with them, so we can like, there's like the Century Safe hack. There's, I2C sniffer. There's a few different things where we can like directly interact with devices. We can also use the Flipper as a medium, so that we can connect our PC to maybe expose UART's terminal, so we can control a board or interact with the board, use it to translate the voltage pulses into something that our computer can understand. But we can also add modules to this, and that's where this Flipper I think is going to be a fun and interesting tool for a very long time. The Flipper Zero, even if they do create new iterations. So right now there's only one officially supported board. I believe that's the Wi-Fi dev board with the Marauder firmware. But the community is coming for these GPIO pins in more ways than one. Lol. But Yeah, and there's just people are finding all kinds of fun ways to add functionality to this device. I'm really excited because I saw recently that there is a tool that's it's an ESP8266D auth tool. So that's going to be really fun. I hope to get my solder game together. I do happen to have a D1 clone. Of course, it wants to freak out. So I do happen to have a D1 clone, D1 mini clone that I can solder some wires to and see if I can make this work. Maybe make a little video out of it for us. But essentially, what that means is that the only limitation of this device is the creativity of the users, and then maybe like the power of the microprocessor, the power of the battery on board, maybe the power of the internal storage. So, or the size of the internal storage. But I mean, there's just so much that can be done with this device. And basically, if it has the pinouts and you can write a firmware and you can write a controlling piece of software, you can interact with a lot of different boards. So that's what's going to make this a really cool and fun device, and something that's going to, I don't know, maybe introduce you to some new skills. I haven't done a lot of soldering, not for a long time, and not at least in the electronics realm. I've done some different types of soldering for different type of work, but that's gonna be fun. I'm excited to like sit down and do a little soldering and play around with what we can do here with the exposed GPIO. The flipper has been compared to a Swiss Army knife a lot, and I think that that's actually probably one of the best comparisons that you can make out there, because the flipper Zero is very much a tool that values form over function, and it's about engineering a lot of different things to fit into one space. So the way that you wouldn't expect a Swiss Army knife to have a full-size knife, a full-size saw blade, a full-size spoon and fork, and a pair of scissors, you shouldn't expect every piece of hardware in the side of the Flipper Zero to have the most advanced feature set. I think one of the big concerns I hear from different people on my channel and other channels is that people feel that the Flipper Zero is underpowered. And, I would argue that it's been shown many times that Flipper Zero has a lot of capabilities, but I do understand where this perspective comes from. Because it's true that there are a lot of like single purpose devices out there that may have more advanced features and more expandability, upgradability than the Flipper Zero does. But I don't necessarily think that that means one or the other is better. It's about use case. And frankly, going out and getting the most powerful tool isn't always going to be the right choice. The Flipper Zero, like I said, is a multi-tool. And that means that a lot of those single purpose devices, you're going to have like 10 of them on you in order to do all the different stuff that you can do with this one device right here. So right there, this makes this a fun and interesting purchase. This is also a fun little playground because if you aren't familiar with all the different stuff that it can do, this is like a place that you can sit down and really kind of hone your skills. The Flipper Zero is great because it's also easy to use out of the box. And I know it can be a little intimidating because it drops you into this menu. And if you're not familiar with what RFID or sub gigahertz or NFC means, you're going to be a little intimidated. But the setup on some of those other devices, those more complex and advanced devices, is going to be a lot harder. And if you're concerned about your Flipper Zero, you definitely should not be purchasing a more complex device. Buy one of these, get comfortable, understand what you're doing, and then maybe you might need some of those advanced features in the future. Because the reality is, if you don't know why you need those advanced features, you probably just don't need those advanced features. In terms of cost, the Flipper Zero is a nice chunk of change out of pocket. That's a reality. It's a good portion of some people's rent, grocery store visit, or more. And the reality is that some devices, some of these single purpose devices are going to cost about as much, if not more, than the Flipper Zero, and then they're going to require being kitted out so that you actually have all the advanced features that you want. And that can cost you up to like $1,000 or more just for a single device. Again, if you don't need that type of advanced feature, then it's probably a better decision not to purchase a very complex device and basically overbuy. computing in general is not about pure raw power, although that can be very fun. It's about practical application. So you want to use the right tool for the right job. Purchasing a very complex and advanced device isn't necessarily going to do it. The Flipper Zero has enough power to pull off a lot of different stuff, and it's very useful almost in its own right, not necessarily in comparison to like a hack RF or something like that. Along the same analogy as Swiss Army knife, just because you have a fork in your Swiss Army knife does not mean that you should be using it for every meal. And there are a few features in the Flipper Zero that stick out to me as maybe not the right tool for every single application. In particular, it's a bunch of the USB features. So, the U2F on this is very cool. It is not enterprise grade. So this isn't going to replace a YubiKey. You can use it for like your password manager, for email or something, but it's not going to replace like a professional use case for U2F. It's not the proper FIDO implementation. USB to UARTs adapter is a fun feature of this device, but it's ultimately, USB to UARTs adapters are usually pretty cheap because there is like some risk that you might burn up your device. And you're supposed to use a multimeter when you do play with UARTs, exposed UARTs terminals, because like I said, they're translating voltage pulses into something that our computer can interact with, and so unfortunately that's not all standardized. Like some will use 3.3, some will use 5, and some will use even higher voltages if they're like older or whatever. So you have to be a little bit cautious. And not necessarily just, plug and play all willy-nilly. If you have a cheaper, USB to UARTs adapter, maybe you're a little less concerned. Maybe if you have a cheaper USB to UARTs adapter and you have like a computer you're not as concerned about, you might be able to be a little looser. It also covers you for like, some sort of hardware malfunction where the device is spitting out higher voltages, when the board's in use or something. So not always the perfect application. And I think the one that really is like, the bad USB is a really cool feature. And a lot of folks have been making interesting content about that. But the Flipper Zero itself kind of belies a lot of the tactics that have, bad USB has historically been used for. Bad USB is a cost-effective way to drop a payload discreetly. And so, you can go out and spend like $20-$30 on a bad USB drive. It's been pre-flashed, maybe a Hack 5 or Ducky or something. You can also go off and flash your own off-the-shelf flash drives if you have that kind of knowledge. Or you can even go and turn like an $8 Raspberry Pi Pico microcontroller into a bad USB drive in about 5 minutes with a little bit of effort. So, you don't need to go out and spend $160. And frankly, if you do, then it's going to mess up some of the normal tactics strategies. A lot of times, these bad USBs are viewed as disposable because you're going to walk up, you're going to plug it into something, you're going to walk away, you're not going to retrieve it. Or you're going to try and convince somebody else to plug it in. And then in that case, again, you're not going to retrieve the device. You're not going to just leave your $160 device lying around and just never come back for it. That's ridiculous. Also, bad USB relies on being discrete. So maybe you're walking around and you just plug a jump drive into a computer. No one's going to ask a lot of questions about that. People are familiar with what a pen drive, a flash drive, a USB drive is. So they're not going to be as concerned. The Flipper Zero does draw attention, and even without the case, it still is something that's going to catch the eye. So people are going to be like, I'm suspicious, possibly. You're also not going to be able to convince somebody to take this device, plug it in, open it up, go to bad USB, and then run your scripts. That's just not how that's going to go. So that kind of defeats that. It self-defeats that strategy. Now, it doesn't mean that bad USB is awful on this device. We're not going to have the same advanced things as like Rubber Ducky 2.0 or something. There's no like OS detection and stuff. But bad USB usually does run like one script and you're done. Maybe there's ability to, bad USB, like Rubber Ducky does have like OS detection, so it might be able to figure out which is the right script. I don't know if you can piggyback on like scripts like based on action, but I do know that the Flipper Zero basically allows you to arbitrarily run different scripts. So you can run a script. If it succeeds, you can run another script if to build on that success, or if it fails, you can run another script to attempt do a different attempt in a different way. So that is interesting, and that allows us to do some more complex attacks, some more complex interactions with different computers. So it's not going to replace bad USB in every instance, but it is still a cool and fun feature. And why not? We already have a USB port, might as well, right? So one of the issues I do want to talk about with this device is gamification. When I first got this device from the Kickstarter, I had looked at some of the advertisements, and the Flipper Zero in my mind had kind of given me the impression that this was more than a Pwnagotchi, right? A Pwnagotchi is a device that is aesthetically a Tamagotchi, but it doesn't offer any sort of game inside. The Flipper, however, promised to have a little dolphin that we interact with, that we raise, that that will be sad when we don't play with it, and will be happy when we succeed. But I'm here to tell you that there's really absolutely no gamification of this device, and I made that in like two ways, right? So one, there is no game inside the device that's going to direct us on how to use this, right? There's no introductory levels that give us a hand on what the controls are and how the HUD looks and feels and what the gameplay expectations are. There's no direction. It's going to drop you into the device, and we're going to have this menu. And if you don't know what these things are, you're not going to know how to use them. There's some light documentation online, but there is no game inside of here. Now, there is a leveling system. You can level your Flipper Zero, but ostensibly it's broken and very cheaply implemented. So nothing gives user feedback on like how much experience you're gaining, or for different actions. My God, my neighbors sometimes. So nothing gives feedback for like and nothing tells you how much experience until at the next level or anything. And basically, there's just this bar that just keeps going up for some reason, and then it just doesn't give you any kind of good feel that it makes you want to like keep coming back for more. On top of that, like, there's very little incentive to level up your Flipper Zero. The only thing that you unlock are these animations. So you start off as a little dolphin, and then you go to the next level and you have more cybernetic stuff, and then in the end you have the most cybernetic stuff. That's just not enough incentive for a gamer to continue playing this game, especially considering there is no game, right? It's about hacking. And so if you're not interested and invested in hacking stuff, then you're just not really gonna have a great time. Now, through the clever tools of code analysis, folks have actually figured out how much experience you get for doing different actions. You can find that online if you'd like, or you can search the code yourself. They've also found out there's a daily limit. So there's like a 110-point daily limit, I believe, which can be cheated by restarting the device, or at least at one point in the firmware could. And in the end, folks have actually been able to ostensibly adjust the firmware due to its open source nature, and a community member has written a Python script that will allow us to set the experience level at whatever we want. So kind of in the vein of hacking in general, it's more fun to hack the Flipper to whatever position you want it to be in terms of level than it ever would have been to play the game, if you will. So in general, hackers don't play games nice or well. And I think the Flipper team knows that, and that's why they didn't really invest a lot in that. But I do think there's a handful of reasons why we haven't seen gamification of the Flipper. Number one being that this is a new device. It's in infancy. The firmware is in its infancy, and they've been spending a lot of time and energy putting together a lot of the basic hardware support. And they've been doing a great job. I mean, there was not this many different types of NFC or sub-gigahertz available just months ago. Same with like RFID and everything. Like they've really been changing and adding different options as time goes on, and it's really cool to see the different possibilities. Oh my God, it's so much nicer. But that's been the better place to invest their time and energy, right? Not in trying to gamify the device, which is frankly out of the scope of most engineers. It's a whole separate ball game, right? Uh, I do think a lot of the practical, like gamification techniques, would not go over very well here either. Users are looking at this as a tool, who are looking for this as a tool, are not going to be excited about having features locked away when they go to use their Flipper Zero to be unlocked later. It's not going to fly very well, especially considering that this device requires external interactions, and there might not be enough external devices around you to unlock the feature that you actually wanted to use in the first place, which would just be a total bummer. So in the end, folks have already shown time and time again with the Flipper Zero that they will hack through anything, and it just feels like a poor decision to waste their time on truly gamifying that this device at least in a traditional way, because nobody's going to sit back and wait for that. They're just going to unlock the device through the mechanism of hacking, because this is a hackable device. So in the end, I don't think we'll ever see gamification for a very specific reason, and that is because I think it would land them in a bit of a legal gray area. I'm not a lawyer, but what the Flipper team cannot do is encourage illegal hacking, and they take great lengths to be clear about that in a lot of their documentation and on their website. They can give us some educational stuff. They can show us how the technology of the device works, but they cannot encourage us to hack. Probably because, hacking requires external devices. And what the Flipper can't do is verify your permission or ownership of different devices. So it can't tell that what you're doing is legal or not. So to encourage us to interact with external devices specifically could be construed as encouraging illegal hacking. I can imagine a kid getting in trouble and saying, well, the Flipper told me to do it, and they might have a case there, considering all the problems they've had with customs and PayPal and, manufacturing, chip acquisition, shortages, stuff like that. I don't think that they're looking to push that boundary. So I don't think we'll ever see true gamification unless they find a very intriguing and novel concept. If you're looking for a game, if you're looking for a toy, this is not it. This is a penetration testing tool, or generally a hacking tool. And you're going to have to do the same thing we've been doing for many, many decades, which is do the painstaking and boring research so that you can learn how technology works and then find new and novel implementations of that technology in ways that not everyone's going to enjoy or like, which is awesome. In the last video, I did talk about firmware restrictions. I was kind of bummed about them. I made a whole entire video about firmware restrictions recently, so if you want more information on that, go ahead and check that out. The TLDR is that this has to be done for legal reasons. The device only has the restrictions on it because they legally cannot sell it around the globe without those restrictions, those regional restrictions. The feature of the Flipper Zero is that you can actually get rid of them, right? That's a feature of this device, is that its open source nature allows us to manipulate the device or the firmware on the device so that we can have access to all the features the hardware offers. It's not a bad thing, it's a good thing. It's a feature of the Flipper. And frankly, it's good that we have those on here, because the restrictions on here, because it's bumpers for new users. The possible damage that you can do, including interfering on medical device ranges, is serious. You can mess up somebody's life-saving technologies, and that is just really not cool. It's very, very, very unethical, and nobody here wants blood on their hands, I'm sure. So it's good and important that those regional firmware restrictions exist, and frankly, it's a big responsibility to remove them. And it's a responsibility that I don't want. I don't want to have to deal with being concerned about whether or not I'm in a medical device range or emergency services range or something every time I go to send a sub-gigahertz signal that I've found on the internet or whatever. So it's really just not the killer feature that people assume it is, that you unlock it and then all of a sudden you're going to have access to all those other cool stuff. Unless you're really looking to do something super nefarious, the only outcome is that you're probably going to be trying to interact with devices that are actually in a different region. So, long story short, not that big a deal. Firmware restrictions are fine and undoable, if you will. I also talk about access. So access to different devices that you might need to interact with, because like I said, this requires external devices. And it's true that you just may not have a lot of stuff around you. The good news is it's actually relatively cheap to find some of these devices. You can find some of these cheap devices that have like a sub-gigahertz remote or something like that around. They're out there, and you can find different stuff to play with if that's what you're interested in doing. It's also possible you might have a bunch of stuff around you that you're not aware of yet. And I made this, I think my last video about this, spotting some gigahertz devices, because, what I really wanted to encourage is the notion that a lot of the technologies we're going to interact with are not like consumer facing technologies. So we have to do a little bit of work. We have to kind of readjust our brains to think about, well, maybe why what devices are sub-gigahertz devices, what devices might be using RFID or NFC inside of them, and kind of being able to look beyond the face value of a device. So it's possible you might have something already around you, some stuff around you, but do some research, look into it, see whether or not you have those tools and whether you're going to have, or those devices, and whether you're going to have to invest a little bit to play with them, because I always encourage you to follow the ethical hacking credence, which is that you should not hack devices that you do not have permission to hack or that you don't own. Long story short, I think that's probably one of the most important things that I didn't, that I actually talked about last video. One of the things that rings the truest. It's possible you might not have a lot of stuff to deal with or interact with, and that's okay though. As long as you have enough money to invest in a couple other devices. I also, I think the thing I disliked about my last video was that I viewed this through kind of too narrow of a lens. I was really looking at the capture and emulation side of this, the element of that, and I was not looking at the device holistically. So this device is much more than just capture and emulation. It's much more than just a penetration testing tool. It's a full-fledged hacking tool. It can assist us in a ton of ways, whether it be radio and chip hacking, hardware hacking, or even like it can assist in software hacking. Right? Just because we've captured information doesn't mean that information needs to stay on this device, or that it needs to be emulated with this device. One of the most intriguing projects I've seen was a person who used a Flipper Zero to capture infrared remote codes for a device that was also capable of taking in information through the network. And what they were able to do was translate the IR codes into something that they were able to send over the network, and then ostensibly creating a wireless remote for themselves, in like a Wi-Fi remote for themselves, for a device that never was supposed to have that. And that's actually a really cool and novel use of the information we capture from the Flipper Zero, because it's not all about just sending stuff. It is about receiving stuff, and that can be almost as powerful as the ability to send. This device is intriguing because it is a full-fledged hacking device, and it's also a hackable device. So not only can it be fun to play with, it's fun to play with. We can make a lot of adjustments on our own. We can change community firmwares. We can do a lot of stuff that, frankly, I've just learned a lot in terms of code analysis, in terms of better understanding GPIO, in terms of just like finding fun and interesting ways to implement C code. I'm not the best developer, so it's fun to play around with, trying to write applications or whatever, which I've done with no success yet. But you know, this device will teach us a lot. And I guess, like, you know, I'll wrap it up. I really like this device a lot. I've fallen in love with it, and I carry it around with me everywhere I go. Because what I feel with the Flipper Zero is that if you're willing to give it energy, it will give you back tenfold. So if you're willing to sit down and really just, you know, hammer on the manuals and the documentation, if you look into some of the government regulation stuff and you start reading up on the different technologies and the different fun ways you can play with your flipper, you're going to learn a whole lot. But what this device is not going to be great for is practical jokes and hacking. You know, practical, you know, hacking jokes or whatever. You know, if you're just in it to pop some Teslas, to turn off some TVs, I don't think that this device is going to hold your attention very long. I really just don't. I feel like it's going to be a device you're gonna end up throwing in the closet, or you're gonna end up trying to resell, because it's frankly just not going to capture your interest. There's not enough there to chew on, in terms of just capturing and sending codes. Frankly, there's a lot more to it, but if you're not interested in that, then this is not going to go a long way. There's no game in here. Nothing's going to help you learn how to use this device. You have to be a self-motivated user, as most hackers are. Otherwise, you know, the Flipper Zero is not going to be able to do the hacking for you. If you need the advanced features, you know this isn't the device for you. But it's still a fun tool to have. So, I mean, for 160, 200 bucks, if you're in cybersecurity already and you enjoy it, I'm sure you have plenty of money to spend on a goofy little toy like this. Why not? But again, in the end, I think the Flipper has proven itself to be a relatively powerful device, and even the simple hacks are powerful hacks. I mean, the fact that people are out here changing the price of gas on the sign is, I mean, a powerful hack, even if it's a simple hack, like it's a simple remote emulation, but that's something that's going to piss people off. There is strength in this device. It's not weak. It's simply not the strongest device, but it is a great place to learn, and a great little tool to pull off a bunch of different abilities, different hacks, different solutions to different problems. I mean, I think one of the interesting parts is, like, I have like the set of tags I used for my last video. They only came with one remote. This device has allowed me to capture those codes, and so now I can leave my remote at home, which I was never going to bring with me on the road anyways. But if I'm out at work or I lose my keys in the car or something, I can always use my flipper, which I keep with me all the time. So there is practical value here. There is, you know, educational value. There is hacking value. There's a lot of different things that can be done with this device, and I really do think it's a good buy for $160 to $200. Don't buy from scalpers. Don't buy for more than that price tag, because the value proposition starts dropping dramatically after that. And don't be a scalper. That's real shitty. Let folks use this device. Free the flippers. You know what I mean? Don't bogard. I love this thing. If you know, hopefully this has helped you learn a little bit more about whether or not this device is going to be interesting to you or not. And with that being said, I'm Rad Linux, and hopefully I'll see you again next time. Take care.